Wonderful. Thank you very much. So welcome, everyone. We are going to wait a few minutes, let folks join, and then we will start. Hope everyone's doing okay. Hope everyone's enjoying the cool weather across most of the United States. Get rid of that. Outstanding. All right. We will let the attendees fill up a little bit because our numbers are still going up pretty fast. So we'll allow people to come in. Welcome, everyone. This is Challenges in Pediatric Clinical Neuroscience Research, and we will be starting in a few minutes once we sort of even out on the attendees. Should not take too long. And as everyone knows, well, we'll talk about the questions and we'll talk about the availability of the materials afterwards as well. All right. Our numbers are still going up, so I'm going to hold off just a minute or two, and then we will start. I want to make sure we have enough people here, people who want to come in. Maybe give it another minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We're very excited that you're all here. This is our only our second webinar this year. We need to do these more often, but all right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar in the series Challenges in Pediatric Neuroscience Research. My name is Adam Hartman. I'm one of the program directors in the Division of Clinical Research at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, which is one of the institutes at the U.S. National Institutes of Health. I'm also a practicing child neurologist and epileptologist. So we created this series to help investigators overcome some of the challenge that they might face in pediatric neuroscience, including areas in neurology, neurosurgery, psychiatry, psychology, neurodevelopmental disabilities, physiatry, critical care, emergency medicine, pathology, radiology, and pharmacology, just to name a few. The ultimate goal is to improve the quality of care for our patients, but the more proximal goal is to enhance research that will facilitate improvements in practice. Our webinars are targeted to trainees, senior investigators, and even those who aren't currently involved in research. We're trying to make the pie bigger, so to speak. So today we are hosting Dr. Hadas Nahman-Averbuch from Washington University in St. Louis and Dr. Michael Oshinsky, who's the director of the NINDS Office of Preclinical Pain Research. What we're discussing today is research in pediatric headache. And the main reason for this is because we don't fund a lot of studies. We don't get a lot of applications in this area. And yet those of us who practice know that this is one of the major, no matter what your subspecialty is, this is one of the major things that our patients come to discuss with us. So first, a few technical notes about the webinar. The session's being recorded, and it will be transcribed and archived on the NINDS website. Details about where to find that archive version will be posted on social media and various newsletters. There will be a question and answer segment at the end to ask a question of our presenters. You can click on the Q&A icon on the lower toolbar. I will moderate the question period. A special thanks to Dr. Alvarecinos from NINDS for the technical support in coordinating the webinar, and the NINDS Office of the Scientific Liaison for all of its support and the publicity. Okay, let's get started. So Dr. Hadas Nahman-Averbuch is our first guest. She'll be describing her career path. And so rather than telling you her bio, I'm going to let her talk about her career path and her bio. And then when Hadas is done, we will get on with Michael. Hadas, the floor is all yours. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Let me see if I can. Do you see my slides? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to talk about my journey so far, how I got to this line of research and some of the struggles. So we're going back to 2006 when I finished my bachelor degree in biology. And I guess I didn't really know what I can do with a bachelor degree in biology. I just decided to do a master degree. And I was interested in so many things. I reached out to labs that are doing research in psychiatry and in cancer, genetics, and some just did not answer me. With some, it didn't work out. And then I looked at the web page of Dr. Yarnitsky, who was studying pain. And I remember specifically the line that got my attention was pain and music. I thought that would be very interesting. And I reached out to him and we talked, and we decided I will do my master's degree with him. Just a fun fact, this study that they had about pain and music never worked out. So what I got interested in didn't actually work in that lab. But I did my master's degree with Dr. Yarnitsky from 2006 to 2009. And my thesis was pain processing and its relation to autonomic function in chemotherapy-induced polyneuropathy patients, a huge title that allowed me to learn a lot about basic mechanisms of pain, quantitative sensory assessments, neuropathic pain, autonomic function. You can see I have some papers out of this, but nothing about migraine, nothing about pediatric pain. Everything was in adults. So when I completed my master's degree, again, I was thinking what I can do. I just decided to continue and do a PhD. And I stayed in the same lab. And around that time, when I started my PhD, Dr. Yanitsky, together with other colleagues from the lab, Dr. Yelena Granowski and Rit Weisman-Fogel, and together with his collaborator from the United States, Bob Coggill, they received a grant, the BSF grant. And they asked me if I want to be the student working on this project. I said yes. And their project was imaging and psychophysics of endogenous analgesia in migraine pathophysiology and treatment. So this is the first time that I had some relationship with migraine and started to learn about migraine. So the first year of my PhD, I did a study that looked at, we were trying to find a paradigm to assess inhibitory pain modulation that we can use in the scanner. So the first part, I assessed the paradigm and looked at inhibitory pain modulation in patients, adults with migraine. And then I went to Bob Coggill's lab at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, and we tested this paradigm in the scanner in healthy adult participants. So that was what I did for the first year of my PhD. And then for personal reasons, I left the project and I focused on something else completely, which is noradrenaline and its mechanisms and how it's related to pain in healthy adults. So that was at the end of my PhD. I had one study with migraine. I moved on to do my postdoc, and I contact Bob Coggill, which we kind of talked when I was there for my first year of PhD, and we talked that I will come back and do a postdoc with him. And I was thinking I was going to Winston-Salem and looking at studies with adults, but as I was reaching out to him and saying, hey, should I look for apartments, daycares, everything in Winston-Salem, he told me, yeah, sure, just search Cincinnati. So he just moved to Cincinnati Children's. I have to admit, I had no idea where Cincinnati is. I was like, where is Cincinnati on the map? And then it was, where is Ohio on the map? But I think it turned out to be really great. For me, Cincinnati felt like New York compared to Winston-Salem. It was a huge city, and I loved it. So Bob just opened his lab there, and we had another faculty there, Chris King, and I was there. We all came from the adult world, and we knew nothing about pediatric pain. And the first study that Bob had, he got a grant. It looked at brain mechanisms underlying individual differences in pain. That was in adults. So after, it took us about 6 months to just get the lab up and running, make sure that we have this project in adults working. And after we had that, we were thinking, well, since we're in Cincinnati Children's, I guess maybe we should start doing looking at pediatric pain. And again, we didn't know a lot or anything, I guess, about pediatric pain. And we teamed up with Dr. Andrew Hershey and Dr. Scott Powers, who are the co-director of the Headache Clinic at Cincinnati Children's. And I had, one study in migraine, so that was a nice connection to them. And we thought the first project that I wanted to do was to try and replicate the findings that I had from my one study in adults to see if that would be replicated, if we will see the same result in children, in adolescents. And I applied for a junior postdoc grant from Cincinnati Children, the Strauss Award, and I received it and I did the study. Now, another reason for doing this study, I have to admit, was just feasibility. Again, we had no idea how it's going to be to work with adolescents. So we didn't know if they can tolerate our stimuli. We didn't know if they will give us reliable pain ratings. Will they even understand us when we ask them to give us pain ratings? I think at least in my head, when I thought of adolescents, my picture was of a 3-year-old that can't really understand. So I think it's just the first time that we had a study with pediatric patients. So this is the study that we did, and I had some improvements. So for the first one with adults, I had only one control group. So I had a women with migraine and healthy controls. Here I added another control group. So I had adolescents with migraine, healthy adolescents without migraine, and also healthy adolescents without migraine, but with a family history of migraine. This is based on one study that I just remembered reading from 2003, I think, and they showed that healthy participants with a family history have something different in their neurophysiological responses. So I wanted to see if I will find it also with psychophysics and with our tests. And this is one of the key findings. And yes, we actually found that healthy adolescents with a family history of migraine, they have higher pain ratings to noxious heat stimuli compared to healthy adolescents without family history of migraine. So I found it really interesting, and that later led to my current line of research. But also when I was doing this study, we always control for sex and age, right, in the adult studies. And when I did the study and interacted with my participants, I found it really challenging sometimes to guess their age. I had a participant that looked very mature, but behaved in a very childish way. And the opposite, I had someone that looked child and behaved in a really mature way. So I remember going to Bob's office and say, there is something that we're missing. There is like this extra piece for adolescents. And that's the first time that I start thinking about puberty and what puberty means. At the beginning, I thought it's just like menarche. You go to sleep pre-pubertal, you wake up post-pubertal, which is obviously wrong. Luckily, one of the world experts in puberty was in Cincinnati Children's, and I started working with him and learning more about puberty and the mechanisms behind puberty and what it means and the changes that we have. And I wrote 6 foundation grants and applied for a K-9 3 times when I was a postdoc, and nothing got funded. So I had this great idea, but unfortunately it didn't work. Now, in addition to writing grants, when I was doing my postdoc, I also started getting more and more involved in the pediatric migraine field. So we had a study looking at alterations in neuro and psychophysical factors after cognitive behavioral therapy in adolescents with migraine. That was led by Bob Cargill and Scott Powers. And we had 2 publications. The second one received the 2020 Members' Choice Award from Headache Readers, which was really nice. I also was involved in a study looking at sleep in adolescents with migraine that was led by Dr. Chris King. And I worked with my colleague from sleep medicine to look at another aspect of this. And I had a few more publications about experimental pain in patients with migraine. So after my postdoc, I was well into this field of pediatric headache. So then back in March of 2020, I did my interview at Washington University for assistant professor position. And because of COVID and shutdowns and delays, my start date was actually almost a year and a half later in July 2021. It was a bit frustrating at the beginning. I was eager to start my lab and start my research, but looking back, it allowed me to really finish writing all the studies and all the results that I had from Cincinnati Children's. And then when I was thinking of what will be my first idea, looking back at the participants, healthy participants with family history of migraine, I wanted to focus on this group and see if there is something that we can use to predict who is going to develop migraine as they go through puberty, because puberty is a critical period, and we see an increase in migraine prevalence as adolescents go through puberty. So I wanted to know if there is something we can use to predict who is going to develop migraine symptoms and what are the changes related to that. And I used some of the pilot data from Cincinnati Children's, mainly the longitudinal data, and also data that I collected at Washington University for more of a feasibility. I also received 2 foundation grants from the International Association for the Study of Pain and the International Headache Society that helped me get this feasibility data at Washington University. And we wrote a grant, and we received an R1 to do the study. And I know that I said it really fast and it's just one sentence, and I received R1 and it sounds so great and amazing. I went back and I want to show you a little bit about the process that it took me. So I counted 59 versions of this grant, and I'm sure there were more that I missed, or that, you just made say, you click save and you don't save it as a new version. The first version was back in August of 2020. And we submitted it about a year and a half later in February of 2022. So, and we actually, the start date was December 2022. So it's a really long process. It could be frustrating. You write and you rewrite and you change. But, when people say we got the grant, there is a lot behind that. So after I received the grant, and based on some of my discussions with the patients and also with clinicians, they mentioned an interesting phenomenon in which some adolescents, they have migraine as children, and then when they go through puberty, they become headache-free. They don't have symptoms anymore. So there's a big improvement in migraine symptoms. And unfortunately for other adolescents, there is a worsening of their symptoms or no change. So I thought that is very interesting. And again, that could be really helpful once we know who is going to be headache-free, who will have worsening of their symptoms. Maybe we can do something to prevent that. And also by better understanding these changes, maybe that could open the way for new interventions. So again, I wrote the grant, and that's the second R1 that we received. Let me show you that process. So here I only have 31 versions. The first one was in April 2022, and it was submitted almost a year later in February 2023. We got a great score. We got 13 percentile. Back then, the pay lines were 14 percentile. So we're really excited. All the co-investigators saying, yay, you got the grant. We're so happy. And a month after that, after we got the score, the pay lines were reduced to 11 percentile. So we actually did not get the grant. It wasn't funded. And we had to resubmit it. It was resubmitted in October, and we got 6 percentile, and it was the start date was a few months ago. So again, lots of emotions up and down, lots of hard work. So I think maybe to finish with a few tips for researchers. First, I think it's so important to establish collaborations. You learn so much from other people, especially people that are not in your field. So for me, I have collaborations with clinicians, with basic scientists, clinical researchers, psychologists, physiotherapists, biostatisticians. I think when you hear different perspectives, I think that will just get your research to a different level. Get feedback about your proposal. After you write your grant, get feedback from many people. You can also look at the list of reviewers that are on your study section. So if they're mostly clinicians, maybe ask feedback from a clinician. If they're mostly basic scientists, maybe ask feedback from a basic scientist, because it can read very clear to you because you're so into it. But when other people read it, they start to notice, wait, this is not clear. Wait, I don't understand that. I thought this is completely different research. So get feedback about it. Use your institution. At WashU, we have the Institute of Clinical and Translational Sciences, and that was super helpful. They have editing service, for example, that I use for both my grants. I remember, I don't know if you noticed, but English is not my first language. And when I wrote, I think I wrote something in the first grant that I positioned myself to be an expert in this field. But instead of positioned, apparently I wrote poisoned myself. And I got a comment back from the person that edited my grant saying, oh, I really hope that is not true. So that's a funny mistake, but again, it's really helpful that you have someone else going over, making sure everything is clear, no, grammar mistake or misspells. He also suggested that I will put a figure, which I didn't have in my first or one of the first versions. And again, I think that really helped with the grant. I did a mock study section that we had at the university. Again, they gave me comments that was really helpful. And you obviously have your departmental grants team and budget team. They will have good suggestion, good tips, how to write your budget and make sure you have everything, all the files that you need and you're with the deadlines. And last but not least, obviously talk to your program officer. My program officer is going to talk next. And he was a huge help with guiding me through this process. There are many things that I did not know about NIH. And I'm really grateful for the guidance and the tips and the help. So this is just to show you my thank you slide. I have so many amazing collaborators from different departments, and there are clinicians and there are basic scientists, just as I mentioned, psychologists. So I have people from psychiatry and from neurology, OBGYN, endocrinology. And I think that is really what makes my research really important and good. I have an amazing team of postdocs and coordinators and students. Obviously, thank you to the funding agencies. And you have my website and my email. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to help. Thank you for listening.
Well, thanks, Hadas. That was fantastic, as we knew it would be. We really appreciate it. Please stick around. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. If you look on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a little question mark that says Q&A below it. Please post your questions there, and then we will start taking questions. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce Dr. Michael Oshinsky, who is the director of the NINDS Office of Preclinical Pain Research. He joined NINDS in 2014 as the program director for pain and migraine, and in 2022 was appointed the director of the NINDS Office of Preclinical Pain Research. As the director, he's responsible for coordinating the research and administrative issues related to pain and headache research across NINDS's divisions of neuroscience, translational research, and clinical research. He is also a co-chair for the Trans NIH Helping to End Addiction and Long-Term Initiative, or HEAL initiative. A major goal of the HEAL initiative is to accelerate the discovery and preclinical development of pain treatments with little or no addiction liability. Dr. Oshinsky received his BA in biology with a concentration in neuroscience from Brandeis University, where he learned electrophysiology in the laboratory of Eve Marder. He then earned his PhD in neurobiology and behavior from Cornell University in Ronald Hoy's lab, studying neural circuits. As an NIH-sponsored postdoctoral fellow at University of Pennsylvania, he trained with Gary Aston Jones in neuropharmacology and neuromodulation. He was on the faculty in the Department of Neurology at Thomas Jefferson University from 2001 to 2014. At Thomas Jefferson, he was the director of preclinical research at the Jefferson Headache Center and led an NIH-funded research program aimed at developing and characterizing animal models of headache. In 2011, he was awarded the Harold G. Wolf Award for Headache Research. Michael, welcome. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm sorry, that was way too kind an introduction. I definitely have to shorten my bio on the website. Thanks so much, Adam. Hadas, you did such a wonderful job on that presentation. I mean, that was really inspiring for me. So I hope it inspires everybody else on the call. My goal of this talk is to really, give you an introduction to interacting with your program officer, understanding how NIH could fund your headache or migraine research idea in working with pediatric population or whichever population you're working with, and to really fundamentally understand that we as program officers are here to help you, because ultimately we understand that helping you with your application, with your formulating your research idea and getting through the NIH system will develop the research, get the data together so that we can get better treatments into the hands of physicians and the patients. All right, next slide. I want to do that. All right, there we go. So this first slide here, I'm just showing you that, over the last few years, there's been a pretty significant increase in pain research funding across NIH. And it's not just one institute, it's really a lot of institutes. And this inflection point after 2018 was associated with the NIH HEAL initiative. But you shouldn't think that it's only the NIH HEAL initiative that is funding this research. It is really these 20 ICs, which are institutes and centers at NIH, that are funding them. And that the pain portion of the HEAL initiative is about, let's say, about $300 million. And you see that before HEAL funding, there was about $500 million pretty consistently from 2012 through 2018, maybe a little blip there at 2018. But now NIH is spending about $1 billion on pain research, which, migraine and headache disorders would be included in that. Um, and you see that there's a catalyst of the additional monies that have been brought in for the HEAL initiative, so that it's not hasn't just been a flat addition to that, but what we've seen is that there's more research going on, there's more training going on, there's more researchers putting in those applications. So there's been really a huge increase in the pain research and funding across the NIH, and it's not just for those pain disorders, but also for headache research. So if you look there between 2010 and 2016, basically the funding was flat between 20 and $24 million. And after that 2016, we saw an increase in the number of applications we were getting associated with studying headache or migraine. And in 2023, the dollar amount was about $59 million, including 92 unique projects funded by 16 different institutes and centers at NIH. And that's a tremendous amount, but I have to tell you, it's a very small percentage of that is pediatric research. And there's a lot of, let's say there's available funds, and there's an interest on the program side at NIH for you to put in your applications studying headache in a pediatric population. So any discouragement you might have, any negative perception that you might have about NIH being interested in your pediatric population or in headache research should be dispelled by these data that I show you here. We are very interested in these applications. They get through study section. They really do. Um, Hadas made some excellent points about iteration and revision of that application, and putting things in review and responding to that review, and getting a score, and then approving the score because you work with your collaborators, your mentors, and with the program staff to make it a better application and make it a better research project. And it's that research and those scientific questions being refined to really represent what's needed in the field, but also what can be achieved inside the research project that makes it a good project. And the reviewers can sniff that out. And that's why we need all that revision. Okay, so NIH doesn't just fund research. We also fund tools and methods for decreasing the threshold for initiating research projects. And one example of that is the NINDS Common Data Elements, the CDE program. And the goal of the CDE program is to really streamline and decrease that threshold or amount of effort needed to start your research project. So one of the things you need to do when you start that clinical research project is determine what measures you're going to use. That should be essential to the project, or that'll be fundamental to the project. So you'll be able to compare it to other research. Now, this CDE project, we have a headache version of those, and they were developed by your colleagues inside the headache field. And there are many modules that can help you determine which measures you should use and what are the appropriate ones for the type of research project you're doing. This can be a whole hour actually on a lecture on its own to describe the CDEs and how they're used. There are um, resources on the website to help you do that. So if you look at the top of this slide, I encourage you to go there And take a look at that. Just do a search on headache, or just you can use your favorite search engine and just say NINDS CDE headache, and you'll come right to the page here. Use these. And I'm going to ask you also to cite them in your papers that you do, or reference them in your grants, because we track that. And this is a significant expense that we do. And these aren't just made and put on the website to rot. You know, they've been updated now. We've had two major revisions, and then there's constantly small changes that are made over time. So yeah, they should be able to help you. So also, in addition to funding research projects, we fund programs to bring researchers together to then act as a catalyst for collaborations and training, and to also support bringing more researchers into the field. And one of those is the Purpose Network. So if you look down on the screen there, it's painresearchers.com. This is funded as a part of the HEAL initiative, but you do not need HEAL funding in order to be a part of this network. It's a website to connect researchers studying headache, studying other pain disorders in pediatric adult populations. It's like a social media platform for pain researchers. And you can create your own little side group to discuss particular topics, or to get resources to help you with your applications, to learn about new funding opportunities that are that pain is possible to that has the opportunity for you to apply for. So that's and then they have an annual meeting that's not made to supplant or to replace those pain meetings that you already go to, or those clinical meetings that you go to. But this is a place where you could just connect with pain researchers in order to learn about what's new and special in your field. So got a different. So it also has these webinar series. And if you look at the one on the far left, which might be interesting to this particular to the colleagues attending this webinar, transitioning from a K to an R01, that is such an important step in a person's career. And there is a lecture on that. I'll look on the far right over there, setting yourself up for success, the NIH career development resources. Again, resources to help you with your application, with your finding the right program officer. There are tools for that. Finding the right research funding opportunity, the CDs, et cetera. All that is built into these webinars, and we have a whole bunch of them, and they're by experts in the field, et cetera. You look towards the bottom there. This is just a screenshot I did from my page there, but it says new community groups that have recently started, so you can join and become a part of those. And I really strongly recommend that you become a part of this network and build a pediatric headache group that is discussing research ideas. I was recently at the American Headache Society meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona, and then the pediatric group at the beginning of the meeting, they talked about research ideas, and people just raising a hand. Yeah, I'd like to be a part of the group studying that, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't have to only happen in person at national meetings. That can happen on a platform like we have here in the Purpose Pain Research Network. So we really encourage you to take advantage and to use that. Okay, so let's talk about grants a little bit just to inspire you to understand. First of all, inspire you to reach out to your program officer, but number two, to inspire you to look at program announcements not as something that has to be tailored to exactly your type of research in order for you to apply to them. And I'll show you what I mean. This is a general call out that's really important for you to understand. So the early investigator status for those who have finished either their research training or their clinical training that lasts for 10 years. After that, in most cases for a basic scientist after their PhD, in the case of somebody who got an MD and then did some research training or even did a fellowship after that. So let's say at the end of the fellowship, you have to make sure that inside your profile, inside the NIH grant system, that your the dates of your fellowship ending are in there in order for you to be considered for those 10 years. Otherwise, they're going to just take it from the end of your the end when you finish your MD, and you're gonna lose out on some years there. It's really important to know that that early investigator status gives you 10 percentage points above the pay line. Now that's transformative. We heard from Hadas earlier that pay lines change, and getting 10 points up is just a huge amount of help for that first R01 that you'll get. You should know that 10 point or increase on the pay line is not for R21s. And the truth is, R21s are not designed as your first grant to come into NIH. Very often, but not all the time, for those who are doing clinical research, they come in on a K, or those who are clinicians who want to do some research. It's not required that you do that. It's common, again, not required. The R01 is really designed as the stable 5-year grant funding in order for you to pursue your research ideas. Do not think of the R21 as a gateway for an R01. It'll waste your time, and then you might even time out from that ESI status. So just forget that funding and mechanism exists. So you get that R21. Then you could talk to me about what's appropriate to be used there. All right. So the cycle of a grant in NIH is you generate that idea, and like Hadas mentioned, you got to build a research team, really diverse individuals that they're not necessarily all going to be listed on your grant, but diverse individuals that are going to help you with that idea, that are allow you to refine that idea, that bring expertise in that you don't necessarily have, interact with the sponsored programs portion of your institution, get feedback from them. They'll help you with your submission. And the truth is, the grant goes to your institution and not to you personally. So you have to work with your institution in order to get that grant submitted, and then interact with us after if it's funded. Then it goes to NIH. The first place it hits at NIH is the Center for Scientific Review. Doesn't go to the institutes first. It goes to CSR. They determine which institute or center is appropriate for it to go to, and they also determine what review group is appropriate. That study section has at least 20 members on it. So that's the smallest number of people that you should really show your grant to before you submit it. You're going to have 20 different minds looking at it. You should have 20 different minds looking at it before you submit it and get that feedback from those individuals. After the review, then it gets sent to the institute. It might have been assigned there before, but really control the grant and everything that's happening is not given over to the institute until after the summary statement is released, and then there'll be a decision made after the advisory council. Give us some time, really 2 weeks after the advisory council. Whether or not the decision is made at the advisory council is not, but it takes a while for us to process all those hundreds or thousands of grants that we're processing each round. And then feel free to reach out to us. Now, the best time, to find out if it's funded. Don't just reach out to us on the day that your score is released by the study section. Again, it takes 30 days for the summary statement to be released. If it's pretty clear that it's not going to be funded, after that summary statement is released, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll help you interpret the summary statement recommendations from a programmatic perspective. We can help you with that. And if it's recommended to be funding, again, wait till after the advisory council, and the final decision, again, is not council. It is the institute director, and then the funds will go to you, and you get to start the process all over again, generating new ideas and putting new grants in. All right, so how do you find opportunities? So grants.gov is the place to start, but understand that it is complex and it represents granting opportunities from all over the government. I'm going to give you a little hint into the codes that we use before that. PA, and then dash a number. It's usually the last 2 digits of a year, and the IC, and then a dash and a number. It's the number of, just every time a new funding announcement comes out. So it starts at 01, 02, 03. There's nothing special there. So PA is a program announcement. There's no special set aside of money, no special set of review. The PAR, the R represents review. right? So it means a special review for that program announcement. PAS, that S is $sign. Okay, so there's money set aside, and the RFA has special review and money set aside. They could be issued by the IC, or they're also parent program announcement, which is actually the vast majority of money at the NIH goes through these parent program announcements. For the R01, there is the PA 20-185 is for basic science or clinical research, but for clinical trials, meaning usually referred to efficacy, but not only, that's PA 20-183. It's not important for you to know everyone that's listed on here, but I did have one of my analysts look through the open funding announcements and identify that there are at least 29 different funding announcements that headache research would be responsive for. And I have to tell you, zero, not even one of them has headache in the title. So you need to realize that you don't have to have headache or pediatric research in the title of the funding announcement in order for your application or your research idea to be responsive to that funding announcement. You really have to look at the goals of the RFA and to see if they match the goals of your project. And if not, use the parent announcement. That's fine too. That's fine too. But in order to navigate all these different choices, reach out to your program officer. We're very happy to speak with you. Pain research at NINDS. I'm just going to give you some examples of the funding announcements. I know it lists the R21 up there. Unless you've had one or more R01 before, don't even consider that funding announcement. The exploratory clinical trials people like to use for those clinical trials that are in the phase 1, phase 2 stage or proof of concept. And then the efficacy clinical trials, there's phase 3 trials that's listed there also. And then we have these RNM1, which are team-based research projects. Whoops. Again, these is listing the parent announcements that headache or pediatric headache research would be responsive for. That R03, again, is not built to be a gateway to an R01. It's usually a side project. Sometimes there is just you need a small amount of money just to do something in order to maybe build yourself a resource or a library for something, or it's a side project. To look at that, we should really be considering the R01s. I did want to make a shout out to the HEAL initiative because it is so big and so complex, and there's lots of neat opportunities there. If you look through at the right lower portion of the slide there, that's most of the clinical research. I wanted to highlight that kids' pain, it's this dissemination research that is over there. So you can do a search on HEAL, NIH HEAL kids' pain. You can get some more details on that and see if your research project fits in there. And then that workforce enhancement, I wanted to call out again. I already told you about the painresearchers.com. There's also diversity supplements. We have a K through 12 National Clinical Pain Career Development Program. We have K99 R00s, what we affectionately call our Kangaroo Awards, taking you from your research training stage to being to getting your first independent research project. That's the R00, which you can take to get a job at a new institution. And there are administrative supplements to support career enhancement, et cetera. We also have these T90 and R90 research workforce fellowships. They're mostly associated with postdoctoral, but there are clinical management ones also. Feel free to do a Google search to get more details on that one. The last thing I wanted to mention was, the White House is really interested in women's health. I think that would include, girls' health also, definitely from a pediatric perspective. And that includes a lot of the conditions, these pain conditions that fall into this category that might be interesting to those that are attending this webinar. There are funding announcements and specific funding announcements and notices that you can reference in your award for that. You can find those with a Google search, or you can reach out to your program officer and they'll help you guide you through those. All right, so who can answer your questions at NIH? One, before you submit your application, reach out to your program official at the NIH Institute. If you're interested in headache and migraine, feel free to reach out to me or Adam if it's a pediatric proposal, but he'll probably end up sending it to me anyway. After you submit, then you'll be referring to your SRO, your scientific review officer. After the review is finished, then come back to me or your program official, and we can help you out any way you need. Thank you so much for your attention, and my email is on that slide. Please write it down, and I'm very happy to help.
Thanks a million, Michael. I really appreciate that. So we're going to start the question and answer period. If you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A icon. You just click on that at the bottom of your toolbar on the Zoom video screen. So one question that came up, Hadas, was, this one was for you. Were people who have headaches involved in the design of your studies?
That's a great question. For the first one, no. The second one, we have a collaborator, a patient collaborator. I think it's more, we start to get more patients involved in the design. It's more tricky sometimes with adolescents, so it's mostly their parents. But we do try to get them involved. Yeah.
I'm going to add an answer to that too, if you'll allow me. So as a part of a lot of the new funding announcements for writing, I know inside the HEAL initiative, we're definitely doing this, is to actually including in the review criteria. So we're asking the applicants to include patients or those with lived experience in the study design, and then as a part of the review the application's plan for including patients into that design. So be sure to look at the review criteria on those notice of funding opportunities, what we affectionately call NOFOs, to make sure that you are including that if it's requested.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So what do each of you think are the greatest knowledge gaps? If you're someone who is just entering this area of pain research, what do you think for pediatric headache, what are our greatest knowledge gaps right now? Top three. Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, I say, well, I'm going to start with gaps in what individuals need to know in order to apply for an NIH application. First of all,
no,
that's
gaps in the actual research in the field.
Oh, the truth is there's so many. I'm afraid if I started listing two or three that I would only get out applications in that area.
Top five. Understanding that for pediatrics, it's a pretty open landscape, but
so what I'm seeing a lot of is that, asking the question of, do these adult treatments work in a pediatric population? And that is, completely reasonable question, 100% reasonable question. But the truth is many of those are going to be funded by the companies that own those particular assets. What's really open is understanding fundamentally what's the difference in headache. Like, let's say in a pediatric population, it's the same ratio of boys and girls. But then with the onset of puberty, that there's a change there. So that falls squarely in Hadas's area. But I want to go back earlier and ask, well, why is it the same? If we take the hormone question out of there, what mechanisms are there that are consistent between boys and girls that are leading to, brain mechanisms, sensory perception, cortical processing, all these things that are involved in headache pathophysiology, and asking what's special about those individuals that are adolescents, that are not adolescents, that are children that are leading to headache. I think that's an important question that falls squarely in that R01 space that we don't see applications for.
Hadas, what do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of the knowledge that we have about pediatric migraine and headache comes from the adult world. And I think that's exactly the issue. We see something in adults and we just assume that it's the same in pediatrics. And that's why we have similar treatments and everything that we're doing the same. But I think just challenging everything that we think we know because it's based, it was found in adults. Is it really true? Is it the same case with children and adults? And I will tell you, they are different. They're very different in so many aspects that I cannot even list. But yeah, whether it's for a developmental issue for babies and then, children and adolescents, all of this, young adult, there's so many also points for interventions. And maybe when you start tackling this issue right early at the early onset, you will see better responses. And maybe we can, prevent people from being adults with headaches if we treat them well when they're adolescents. When I talk with a few of the adult physicians, sometimes they don't know that you have children with pain because they see the patients as adults, and they don't sometimes ask. When they ask, oh, you started having headaches when you were adolescents, okay, that's interesting, but they don't really realize that. So I think we need to talk more, with the adult physician and get them to acknowledge the importance of everything that happened to the individual as adolescents, and then again challenge everything that we know from the adult world and look at it specifically with the adolescents in our population.
Yeah, and not just the headaches, but also the impact of the headaches on everything else in their lives.
Yeah.
School, social, the list goes on.
I would say also the overlap with other neurological disorders in pediatric population. Many times the headache is associated with them, that comorbidity of epilepsy and headache. That has not been studied in a pediatric population. There's a few studies where it's been, and some of them done well.
I was a co-author in one of them. Yeah, no,
that's right.
But we don't know the why.
We don't know the why. We don't know the mechanism. We don't know if it's different between adults and children also. There's a question in here about the number of postdoc years.
Yeah, you want to take that
limit?
One?
Yeah, I can take that one. That's no problem. Yeah, so if you do, I'm just going to tell you how to find the information. It's really easy, and then I'm going to tell you it. If you do a Google search for NINDS and then K99 and then click on the word eligibility, it'll tell you. It starts off by says eligibility for the NINDS or the NIH K99 R0 is defined as having no more than 4 years of postdoctoral research experience. Doesn't matter 1 lab, 2 labs, 4 labs, doesn't matter those, but just 4 years, and then you time out.
And in general, if you Google NINDS training kiosk, you'll see there's a link that's going to come up that shows you for all of the training related mechanisms, including the K99R00, but others as well, because we get a lot of questions about eligibility for those too. I don't know if either one of you wants to take this question. It's and thanks, Alva actually just posted the posted the kiosk link in the chat. So do you know if organizations like American Headache Society can be funded for dissemination and implementation, or better as a multi-institute collaboration? Is either one of you want to? I realize we're not speaking for AHS, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're not speaking for AHS. This is actually asking if NIH can fund any AHS. That's the way I read this question.
Okay.
Do you know if organizations like AHS can be funded? And the answer is yes. Right? We can fund companies, we can fund organizations, we can fund academic institutions, we can fund even individuals if they can build first of all, you need a DUNS number, right? So you have to go through and the way to get that number is to go to the SBIR website, and it takes at least 6 weeks to do that. So make sure you do it far enough in advance for when you're going to put the project in, but organizations absolutely can be funded. Yeah.
So Hadas, let me ask you, you get the final question. So you gave some great career advice. What would you say are your main takeaways that you want both trainees and people who are maybe new to headache research, but they might have been established in other areas? What are the 2 or 3 career nuggets that you'd like them to take away?
I think first, you just talked about the 4 years, for example, for a K99. So I would say start early. Start working early on your grants. It took me, again, 1.5 years. So if you think of a 4-year when you start a postdoc, and the first year is just like you learn to know the lab and everything, you need to start in the second year to really think of your future study and what you're going to do in your future career. That's very early. So I start thinking early, start working early on your grant. Don't wait for the last minute. Even when you're going to submit the grant, you'll have a computer crash or something will happen. I don't recommend waiting till the last minute. If I don't submit it a week before the deadline, I'm getting nervous. So I think that is something that is going to be helpful in general, whether it's your, again, K or R. For me, again, just talking with people, whether it's patients, clinician, that's where I get the ideas, because they can just throw a sentence of something that they observed, and I will stop them. Wait, you just said something. What do you mean? How is this happening? Did you think about this? And then you just start to have a whole new idea. And that's just how it happened to me with an OBGYN collaborator. But it took us a year to come up with, the whole project. And now we're really excited to do something, hopefully migraine and pelvic pain. So I think that's working exactly what Michael mentioned about women's health. So that will be probably my next step. But again, that just started with a random conversation with a clinician. So again, talk with different people. And I think that's where you will get your ideas.
I think the next two questions here are
Yeah,
program
you want to take them real
related.
quick because I want to give people a little couple of minutes at least.
I will do them real quick. Yeah. So the first
Yes.
one, the grant opportunity for postdocs that are not from the US. The training opportunities are not designed for non-citizens. It's just the way it is at NIH. If you're coming to the NIH to work on a research project, it's really the R01s themselves that we expect you to get that funding for. Now, the R01s are not listed like that. They don't have those restrictions. So, yeah, during your postdoc, you're going to have to be funded from your PI's grant. Can I speak to K awards for clinician scientists? So there's a list here, and it's pretty easy to find. Okay, so do your favorite search engine search for NINDS training or career awards, and it's going to come up to a website where it lists career and development awards. If you scroll down, there's a list under clinical scientist awards, and there's the KO2, the KO8, and the K23. The KO2 is to support early or mid-career clinical scientists in need of additional protected time to do research. So that's mid-career. KO8 is the mentored, so it means there has to be a lack in your training or knowledge of how to do research. That's what we mean by mentored. So the KO8 is a mentored clinical scientist research development award that provides opportunity for promising clinicians to become those scientists or to get those independent award, to get an independent award of where they're still mentored. You can already be faculty to get that. Then there's the K23, which is the mentored patient-oriented research career award that provides supports for career development for clinically trained professionals who made a commitment to patient-oriented research and who have potential to develop into productive and clinical researchers. So I hope that helps, Scott, for there. And then you can click on those and in the websites, and then it doesn't just go to the funding announcement, which are, I understand, really hard and complex to read because of the way they're structured. This opens a web page which gives you really useful information and then lists all the funding announcements that, for instance, there's 3 different KO2s. All right.
Great.
Hope that helps.
Wonderful. Well, sorry we ran a little bit over, but I wanted to thank both of our presenters, both Hadas and Michael. That was fantastic. As I mentioned at the top, the session was recorded. It will be transcribed and archived on the NINDS website in the next week or two. So details about where to find them will be posted on social media and in various newsletters. We did post the NINDS training kiosk and some of the subcomponents of that in the chat as well. So thanks again. Hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and stay tuned. The next webinar is going to be in February, and we're going to be talking about with two other presenters on challenges in translating preclinical studies into actual clinical trials. And our 2 presenters are people who have both a lot of lab experience and also large clinical trial experience in those preclinical models. So stay tuned for announcements for that in February. And everyone stay safe, stay sane, and we'll see you next year. Thanks again.
Thank you.